Thank you, Haf. If you can give me my screen back now that I shared it with you. You have to stop your screen share.
Okay, wait. All right. By the way, can I do the last
Sure,
slide?
of course.
This is my last slide, which is my spot at the cemetery down here. Congressional Cemetery is where my wife and I have a plot. And this is my 75th birthday, where I invited my family to the 75th birthday at my cemetery plot to talk about my end of life planning. Because I do death cafes and legacy workshops. I'm big on end of life planning. So at some point, I'm going to look like this. And that's that. So now I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you.
Let's give Haf a big hand. Woohoo! Excellent. I was able to hear most of it. That was great. Thank you, Haf. You know, what is resonating in me right now is that you are in the midst of doing a lot of saging work, a lot of eldering work. And if you picture yourself on the baseball field of life, or if you want to use Reb Zalman of blessed memory, his language, you're not quite in the December of your life, but you're probably in late October or somewhere around there. You have many years left to live and a lot of very vital things to do, but you're beginning to harvest. And you gave us an opportunity to see the arc of your life and where you came from and what you're thinking of as you're approaching, I'll say home plate, or if we were salmon, we'd be approaching the place in which we all, gather to spawn. Or if we're talking in spiritual terms, in returning to our source when we die. So Haf, thank you so much, because your life is such a delightful pleasure to try to keep track of. What you didn't share was what you learned at Woodstock. And by the way, I could smell the pot smoke at Washington Square Park, underneath when you showed that, for sure. Phew. Well, thank you everybody for sticking with this until I can get back on. As you can see, we have electricity here, and I'm going to be referring back to your presentation during my presentation, Haf, because I was going to end with it actually, but it's going to work the other way as well. If you remember, and now here is Psalm 27, or part of it anyway. Achat sha'alti mi'et Adonai utabakesh, shifti beveit Adonai kol yimei chayai. One thing I ask of Yud Hey Vav Hey, one thing I request is to sit in your presence all the days of my life, to sit in the house of Yud Hey Vav Hey. Of course, what is the house of Yud Hey Vav Hey? That could be interpreted in many different ways. But if we look at the very first letter of Torah, which is what? Anybody?
Beit,
right? Bereshit bara Elohim. What is the word? The letter Beit itself spells a word. What is the word that it spells?
house.
Right, house. Bayit, Beit, Yud, Taf. And so the Torah itself opens, in the direction like a beit does. And I will go back to spotlighting what happened there? There we go. If you look at this letter beit right there, right? It opens to the left and it's closed off on the right here, right? That's because we are warned not to spend too much time looking in that direction, because that's before there was a before. This is the way the Torah reveals itself to us in this direction as we read from right to left. And that's why it begins with that's one reason why it begins with the red of Beit, so that we should be closed off from that. We shouldn't spend too much time in the mysteries about. But it's leading us into the world of duality, right? That letter Bet. I'm sorry, give me a second. There we go. Okay. And in this, then, in this psalm, to sit in God's house, to sit where? To sit right here, where we are, to sit in our places. Like Shiviti Adonai Lenegdi Tamid, we should sit and contemplate and set ourselves before Yud Hey Vav Hey always. It's the same idea. Shiviti Beveit Adonai, the same roots, right? So this idea of sitting in this house means to sit here. For those of you who meditated with us all this afternoon, you know what it is to sit and look in and be informed from without and from within at the same time. That this the godly, how should I put it? The God who's at the center and who fills everything and surrounds everything is that which forms us from inside and outside. So one thing I ask of you, my holy friend, is to sit in your presence all the days of my life. And then back to you, Haf. Lulei he'emanti. So there's the word I mentioned before, had I not, or if I had not had faith, or if I had not had the assurance, if I hadn't been to Woodstock, if I hadn't been married the first time, if I hadn't had a picture taken of me with my family, if I hadn't been reminded the importance of family, if my parents had not been able to make me a bar mitzvah, even though my father went bankrupt. There's so many places in our life where we could say if that would have turned out differently, right? If something else would have transpired. And so that's one of the benefits of doing as Haf has done, and which I have done, which is to write out, to make this arc of your life. Many of us in this room have written spiritual autobiographies. It's kind of like the same thing, drawing out the arc of our spiritual journey. But this is not only a spiritual journey, but it's really a journey in all four worlds, right? A journey in Asiya, in Yetzirah, in Bria, in Atzilut. You know, that motorcycle certainly lives in the world of Asiya, but it was generated by a desire towards adventure. And that, Haf, I only have to assume is part of your adventurous spirit that you were born with. That's part of your ikar. That's part of that's a soul trait. Now, it may not have been awakened before then. And so now looking at our 42 stops, or as many as you can get to, of course, you can't get to 42 or else you'll be dead, right? But looking at the stops along the way, we realize the angels in our lives, those people and events that if not for, right, lule, if not for, then our lives would have taken a different course. So let's take an opportunity to sing a little bit before we go on. Yes, we are all salmon swimming upstream, yearning to return from where we came, from the moment we are born to the moment we return. Return again, return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again. Return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are born and reborn again. Return again. Return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik is one of the great rabbinic rabbis of the 20th century. Wrote some extraordinary works. And one day, perhaps we'll all read one of his books together. I have one in mind that it's going like whoosh, right past me. But here's what Rav Soloveitchik teaches. If you are moving along the circumference of a circle, right? So here's the circle and the arrow is pointing, starting from point A, I didn't label it A, to the next point. If you're moving along the circumference of a circle, it might seem at first the starting point is getting farther away, right? But actually, it's getting closer and closer. Every day is a return, bringing us closer to a completion of the journey, of the cycle. And this, hold on a second, you're all in my way. How do I move you from where I see you? I can't read that. Somebody please read what's on the bottom.
We see time running in a straight line. The Rav points out how time really flows. Teshuvah as a primal gesture, the healing power of the journey we make through life.
So let's unpack that just for a second. We tend to think that time just runs straight forward, but Jewish time does not run straight forward. Although we like to hope that there's a Mashiach at the end of time, but the way that time works within our ability to measure it in the seasons that go from, as the seasons go round and round and the painted ponies go up and down, right? This is the seasonal nature. This is the cyclical nature that Rabbi Soloveitchik is pointing out. And he's going to share with us in a minute how this can both present us with challenges and with the healing that is possible because of the cyclical nature of our seasons. When a person sins, so let's stop right there. What do we mean by sin? Because he's not going to talk about that. But I'd like to for us to come up with, I have an understanding for myself what sin is. He's going to tell us what the effect of sin is on our souls. But anybody, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I can see you now. What is sin? I mean, sin is a big deal, right? In Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We beat our chests for the sin of right? So what does it mean to sin? And you can just give an answer in any world that you wish, or how it affects you, or just as a concept. Anybody? Ronnie, please.
When I think about sin, I think about it as an abrogation, as a making of a poor choice when I could have done something differently and for some reason I didn't, and it's an abrogation.
And how does it affect your soul, your neshama? Why?
That's not part of my theology.
Okay. Can you just speak briefly about what's your relationship to al-Chet?
So my relationship to al-Chet is that my goal is to continuously improve and do a better job this year than I did last year. But bad choices don't make us bad people. They put us into a position where hopefully we will learn and make a different choice going forward.
Yes, for sure. Anybody else? Thank you, Ronnie. I think it's instructive for us to hear from each other what our understanding of this word sin. Now, remember, in Hebrew, it's not sin, it's chet. And there's this idea of that when we sin, we miss the mark. You know, we're always trying our best. And it's kind of like pitching an arrow towards its target, and we miss more often than we hit the bullseye. You know, we miss the mark. But that's one understanding of chet. Anybody want to chime in here? Carol Ann, please, and welcome. Glad you can get on.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking about, I try really hard not to lie anymore. To me, that's a terrible sin, to lie to someone. That really betrays who I am as an ethical person. Have some integrity. Mm-hmm. You know, to have a sense of integrity. If I really try very hard. I can't remember when I last lied, but to me, when I did, I knew that it betrayed my integrity. That was not, it was more than being unethical.
So you're describing as a midah, as a characteristic, as something to aspire to. Keeping in mind, of course, the rabbis do give us a number of situations where lying is permissible, right? So it's not all across the board, but yes, to lie does, and when we know we're lying, and if you want to see lots of people lying in order to save their butts, check out the PBS show Unforgettable. Not Unforgettable. What's it, Renee?
Unforgotten.
Unforgotten. It's a wonderful program. It's deeply human, and it's a British-made detective police show that deals with historical murders, and what they really uncover is humanity. They uncover people's what people have been living with for a long, long time, who have not made teshuvah, who have not repaired their story, and have had to live with certain things for a long, long time. Anybody else? A crack at sin before I take my crack? Jay.
For me, it's about harm. If I create a harm to myself, to others, to the community, to the planet, and perhaps also not taking the opportunity to repair and improve any of those and support and help.
Good. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. And welcome, Linda. All right, let's go back to Rav Soloveitchik. Next, no, page before that. Beep. Okay. So this is what happens when a person sins, says the Rav. He creates a distance between him, herself, and God. All right, so I'm going to offer a comparison that when we're driving our car with a perfectly clear windshield, we can see for miles and miles and miles. But when the windshield gets schmutzy, or when you need to put the defogger on, something has happened, right, to create a inability to see and be seen, for that matter. So there's something happens in our soul when we sin, that a karmic smudge covers our light, and we can either see out or see in or be seen in as well. That's my take. To sin means to remove oneself from the presence of Rabbono Shel Olam, the master of the universe. I was standing between you and sin came and estranged me from you, and I no longer feel that I am before you. So that's the human being talking to God. I'm no longer shiviti. I'm no longer standing before you. So something happened that I estranged myself. Maybe estranged is too powerful a word, too strong a word. I distanced myself, like he says. So the whole essence of the precept of repentance is longing, yearning, and pining to return again. Let's keep in mind here that it is a constant process. It is not something that we reach a final destination. Oh, I did my teshuvah, I'm done, right? My life is made. No, it's something that, this is why it's in our daily prayers 3 times a day. And at the bedtime, Shema B'mitah, on the bedtime Shema, this longing to not hold on to that which has smudged us, right? So he says, longing develops only when one has lost something precious. I think that's really interesting. So this is, if, as Carol Ann, as you were talking about, if you lied, you would have this feeling that you lost something precious inside of you, something that you were protecting, and yet you couldn't. You're only human, and to err is human, is it not? Sin pushes us far away and stimulates our longing to return. Interesting. So sin, in distancing ourselves from God, from divinity, within the sinning itself, something happens if we're paying attention, right? If we're awake, if we're doing our spiritual work, to be able to recognize and acknowledge what we've done, right? And then, oh, I want to make up to you. I'm so sorry. And this is Bein Adam v'Makom is talking about, between a person and God. You know, there are other kinds of sins that have to be asked for forgiveness that are between Adam v'Adam, between people. So then this is why the Rambam, Maimonides, wrote, how powerful is repentance for brings us closer to the presence of God. Last week I told the story, and Renee tells the story a lot about the string story. Renee, you want to tell it for those who weren't here last week?
I always think of this being not so much a story as sort of an image that I carry with me. So there's a teaching that there's a string that connects each one of us to God, a string that goes straight from us to God. And my image of this used to be that it went from the tops of our heads up to God. But my daughter said, when she was young, said, no, maybe it's connected from our heart to God. But in any case, a string that connects us to God. And they say that string connects us to God, except when we sin. A chet causes the string to break. And then when you return, when you perform teshuvah, the string's knotted together again. So you sin, the string breaks, is cut. And then when you perform teshuvah for that, it's tied together. But you know what happens if you take a string and you cut it and you knot it and you cut it and you knot it and you cut it and you knot it? It gets shorter each time you have to tie a knot in it. So I like that image, because to me that says that those of us who've had more reasons to perform teshuvah wind up closest to God.
Thank you, Renee. And if you remember last week, I gave that teaching over in relationship to the Baal Teshuvah versus a tzaddik, and who is closest to God, right? That's the tzaddik. It always stays in the same relation and space to God, but the Baal Teshuvah can draw closer even than the tzaddik because of the reason that Renee just gave. Hi, Elliot, welcome. I'm reading now from a required reading. If you've never read this book, if you don't own this book, you should, because every year you must come back to it in the month of Elul, or actually before that. And Deborah Leska knows what I'm going to say, I think. What am I about to say, Deborah?
Alan Liu.
You are absolutely right. And the book is called This Is Real, and You Are Completely Unprepared. It is a classic. Now, the late Alan Liu, Zichrono Livracha, I never had an opportunity to meet him, but certainly I feel like he's one of my teachers. So continuing with the baseball theme, which I always come back to, of course, he says here, I read a newspaper story about Dwight Gooden, the baseball player. He had just come back from the dead, so to speak, after one of the most brilliant beginnings in the history of baseball. And I think he began his career at 19, and he came up a phenom with the Mets. Gooden's career had gone down in a maelstrom of premature fame, drug involvement, and denial. Then he righted himself, beat his problems, matured as a human being, returned to baseball, and even to New York to pitch again, this time for the Yankees. And after a period of struggle, he found his way back to a rhythm of sorts and became a capable pitcher for the Yankees. There was always about him the weight of his lost potential, what he could have become, but did not. But there were flashes of his early brilliance, and finally he pitched the first no-hitter of his career. His father, whose heart had ached to see Gooden suffer so, after such a brilliant beginning, now lay dying in a hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida. And the day after the no-hitter, Dwight Gooden flew back home to give his father the ball that he had pitched it with. He said he owed it to his father for all the days when he was a kid and his father would take him out to the fields to throw a ball back and forth with him. So, of course, there is also a Field of Dreams moment for those kids like me who weep at the end of the Field of Dreams and at that scene, right? And this is what Zichronot is all about. This is what memory is all about when we get to Zichronot in Rosh Hashanah, which is to remember who we are and to remember where we came from. And I find this very moving. Of course that he goes in to see his father and give his father the ball because he's paying it back, right? It's as if he is saying, the very first lines of the Amidah, which he's giving credit to his father and maybe his father before him. And then Alan Luke goes on to say, I think one of the things we learn in the course of a long journey home is to keep our eye on the ball, on the starting point, on the things in life that are essential, that sustain us. One of the ways our lives heal us is to teach us this. So this afternoon at the end of the meditation, which was about hope, and Lord, God knows that this is a really hard time to have hope in this world. And what I reminded people, and doing so reminded myself, because I've been having a hard time too, to remind ourselves what is our essential nature, right? What is it that not only brings us joy, but what is it that we're trying to get back to? To quote Joni Mitchell, right? When we want to get back to the garden, what is it we yearn to return to when we sing return again, return to the land of your soul? I think this hints at it. This idea that there's a seed in each and every one of us. And I have a short story I'm not going to say what it's about, but there's a woman who's in the marketplace and she sees a sign. It gets her all excited. The sign says, God's fruit stand. God's fruit stand. Oh my gosh, she is like beside herself with excitement. She runs over to the stand and she's peeking around and she's looking and there's God standing, sitting at the counter. And she's so excited for the first time of her life. She could have perfect fruit. It is God's fruit stand. And so she says, I'll have a perfect banana. I'll have a perfect cantaloupe. I'll have a perfect grapefruit. I'll have a perfect peach. I'll have a perfect strawberry. Thank you. And God shakes God's head and says, I'm sorry. I only sell seeds.
Mm.
Another piece of liturgy from what's coming up on Rosh Hashanah, Hayom Harat Olam. It comes after the shofar blast. Each time the shofar blasts, we sing Aresha Sefatenu, Hayom Harat Olam. And if you look at a translation of it, and usually today is the birthday of the world, but that is barely hinting at what Hayom Harat Olam means. Harat comes from the same root for Beherayon, to be pregnant with. So what it's saying is today is the day that is pregnant with possibilities. So what does this have to do with the seeds? And what does it have to do with Zichronot and remembering? And what does it have to do with returning to who knows where? Returning to God? I think it's reclaiming the potential that and the unique potential that each and every one of us was born with in our DNA and in our past lives too, that we're schlepping along with us, that also might need a tikkun, by the way. You know, Rabbi Tirza Firestone is teaching a lot about inherited trauma. Chaya, you shared a little bit about that with us last time. So there's a lot of work to be done in order to wipe the schmutz from the windshield so we can not only see out, but we can see in. And I think that is what quote unquote sin does to us. By not being ourselves, by lying when we know that it would not be good for us, by being grieved, by all the things that we beat our chests for, right? So I'm going to take a moment here, because the question could be, what sustains you? What sustains you? And I want to give you an opportunity to either put in the chat or to unmute yourself and name one thing that sustains you that you can trace back to that first dot on the circle of Rav Soloveitchik's, that you can trace back as far as you are capable of, to that photograph of the little baby with the tushy. You know, oh, who's is this grandma's tushy? I really wanted to say that then, Hoff. You know, we all have that. You didn't see the picture of Hoff, Renee, right? That takes us back to this incarnation that you sense. You know, you don't have to know. You can't know these things. So put it in the chat. What's something that sustains you? What is, or name something that's essentially you. That's actually a different question. Something that's that's the book, Linda. Thank you. The Lonely Man of Faith. We're gonna read that someday. Do as a book club. Music. What else? What sustains you? Faith. Love, belief in ongoing spirit, soul, and energy after physical death, friends and family, theater, art, music, nature, of course, family, humor, of course, Jewish community and nature, my children, spiritual practices, family, dogs, flowers. I got to throw cats in there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. Some of these things are existential things that sustain us. And some of these things are embedded, you know, they're engraved, just like Torah was engraved on those two plaques. All righty. Continuing on. Yom Kippur is a rehearsal for our death. How so? Not a rhetorical question. How is Yom Kippur a rehearsal for our death? How is it a rehearsal for the 40-second stop? Yes.
No pleasure. No, except for connection, spiritual pleasure.
No spiritual pleasure. Interesting.
Well, spiritual pleasure, no other base.
Okay.
No pleasure in any of the other worlds. Well, emotional maybe.
I want to understand what you're saying, Chaya. Is what you're saying that it will, that the moment of our death perhaps will be pure spirit, which is what we enter into on Yom Kippur?
Yes. So there's no food, there's no sex, there's no, well, there might be music, but.
Right. right? No sense, S-C-E-N-T-S. And we wear, what do we wear? We wear shroud, right? We wear white.
We fast.
We fast, we do not eat, exactly. So in a way, we're kind of imitating the angels, but even more so, because the angels are pure spirit, and they they each have one particular job. But and us too, I guess, we've had our deployments. Alan Liu continues: Teshuvah is the little death that connects to the big one. Or as the Rambam says, the repentant should, and this we touched last time too, the repentant should change his name as to say, I am another. I'm not the person who did those deeds. It is as if that person has died. Right? So you do Teshuvah, we're born again, return again, right? To be born and reborn again. This is why this day of Yom Kippur resembles a dress rehearsal for our death, because we die and we're born again. Now, why do we do these things? Because death, like Yom Kippur, atones. It is a day of at-one-ment, right? Atonement, at-one-ment, that we get, even for a moment, a glimpse of the purity of our souls, and that we write the story. That we write the story, not some man in the sky with long hair sitting at his desk, who shall live and who shall die. Some will live and some will die. But we write the story of our lives. And how do we aspire to do that? Through tzedakah, tefillah, and teshuvah, which comes right after that section about who shall live and who shall die. The things that will avert the severity of the decree, avert the pain and the suffering with which that is inevitable with life. You look at the bottom of the page, I wrote, each time we forgive, we bring about the death of something that holds us back, that keeps us from circling the bases. Forgive me for another baseball metaphor. But, if we get thrown out at second, we got to go back in the dugout. But here, if we can somehow, if we can first to see and then acknowledge the things in us that need repair, we stay on the base path, right? And we continue our journey around without interruption. That's a song I want to sing when we're over. So we're talking, of course, again, about time and a different kind of, so what I'm looking for, the way we align ourselves to time. Instead of time being in a straight line, that the circular nature, the cyclical nature of our year, from liberation to revelation to total destruction, to total destruction at Teshuvah, through the heat of Elul to Rosh Hashanah and renewal, right? And then what happens at the very end, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur? Oh my God, I'm still alive. I'm going to shout it to the world and go outside, and I'm going to take, I'm going to Lulehe Manti, I'm going to have faith that all will be well, and that, I could live in my, well, I don't live in my sukkah, but, I can throw myself open to the vagaries of life with greater faith than I had before. The healing power of time. If we are aware of how time moves and of our journeys from home towards home, right? What's done can't be undone. We can't go back and undo the things in our lives that we are ashamed of, or the opportunities we didn't take advantage of. But we wouldn't be right here where we are now if not for Luleh, if not for the choices we did make. What's done can't be undone, but it can be healed. And what we have done can even be the instrument of our healing by recognizing it and repair and acknowledging it and repair, regretting it if necessary, and then doing the repair. One last Alan Liu quote: "The passage of time brings awareness, and the two together, time and consciousness, heal. This is the journey of the high holidays." I'll repeat that. The passage of time brings awareness, just like Kaf in your beautiful unraveling, or sharing of your different spots along the timeline. All right. It brings awareness. And these two things, time and consciousness, can heal us. Does that make sense? If it does, can anybody put it into your own words? How time and consciousness can heal us? Deborah, go ahead, give it a try.
I think with consciousness, we have an awareness of things, and it changes over time. And so given enough time, you can perhaps distance yourself from something or revisit it less emotionally, or any of those. And also as we grow, our consciousness changes. So the two of them together, they work together. I forget what the end part was of what you said.
And the two together have the capacity to heal.
To heal, right. So ultimately we can evolve both of them, through both of them, to healing.
Yeah, thank you so much. What came up for me when you said as consciousness grows was looking at things from the GPS, from God's point of view, right? So seeing our journey, seeing ourselves from a expanded consciousness, Moachin de Gadlut. Judy, did you have your hand up? No, okay. Anybody else want to? Yeah, Carol Ann, time and consciousness.
I'm just going back to what you shared about hope, so that perhaps if one has awareness and consciousness, and over time seeing the ebb and flow of the problems in life, we can have hope. We can be more aware, be more conscious, more able to have hope.
From your mouth to God's ears, huh?
I mean, well, do you see? Tell me what you see as the flaw in that. No.
I think that's right. I think there's hope in what you said.
Oh,
for sure. One more, Huff. Thank you, Carol Ann.
So the exercise that you are having us do, and that I did somewhat tonight, is a reflection of the time I've had so far and the consciousness that I now have about what that was all about as I look back on it and realize it and look at it and evaluate it and be conscious about it. And since you gave me only October, I'm not in December yet, I've got October, November, and December to figure out what that time and consciousness means for my future life.
Amen. Amen. And you have many more years of time and consciousness. We're coming in for landing, everyone. Thank you so much for being patient tonight with the technology and the lack of electricity that we had at the beginning, from my end anyway. Something from last week is, and who sent this to me? I'm forgetting now. Oh, Scott did. Oh, Scott was going to come tonight. And I told him at 7:20 I had no electricity. In any case, he sent me, remember last week we were talking a little bit about the al-chetz, but also that I'm going to be included in my machzor this year. And other people are doing this as well, which is something called Ahavnu Berachnu. It is a litany of confessing the good, a litany of confessing the good. Now, remember, I mentioned this last week, and somebody, I think, asked, like, where does that come from? And I wasn't sure, actually, that it came from, whether it came from Jewish renewal or whether it was just somebody's idea of, Yom Kippur is supposed to be a very celebrative day. It's not supposed to be all pounding our chests, but rather this idea that we're rounding the corner and coming closer to a full slate and being forgiven for all of our sins. So Rav Kook, but he was drawing on some commentary before him. But Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Palestine, turn of the 20th century, he said the following: a person should also be joyous concerning the good he or she has done. That's great. Rav Kook actually said, I didn't put the she in there. He said that. I'm quoting directly. It follows that just as there is a great benefit to self-improvement through confessing one's sins, so is there great benefit to confessing one's good deeds. Therefore, the commandment of vidui, that's the confessional, was established concerning the setting aside of the obligatory gifts of Teruma and Meiser, which are the gifts that were brought by the Kohanim when the temple stood, right? So they also brought things that brought them joy. They didn't only bring, it wasn't just about the confessionals. And here, I'll share my screen just to give you a little taste of this. I think it's terrific. We have loved, we have blessed, we have grown, we have spoken positively, we have raised up, we have shown compassion, we've acted enthusiastically, we have been empathetic, we have cultivated truth, we've given good advice, we've respected, we've learned, we have forgiven, we've comforted, we've been creative, we have stirred, orarnu, we have stirred, well, it's like we've awoken, we've woken up. We have been spiritual activists. I love that. We have been just. We have longed for Israel. I actually changed that on the one I'm going to be using to something a little different, but I remember something I found elsewhere. I'm not sure that's true for everyone. We have been merciful. We have given full effort. We've supported. We've contributed. And tikanu, like litakein, to repair. We have repaired. And so instead of hitting our chests, we'll give a little heart massage. And I've been trying to figure out what music I'm going to use for it. Because if we use, it's a joyous melody, for all the sins. And I've always, wondered about that. But I guess I'm joyous because I'm cleaning up, cleaning up my act. And, but if anybody has any suggestions, any ideas of a melody for this, let me know. I'm going to be thinking about that as well. So thank you all again so much. There's a song I want to end with, and it's a pretty obscure song. It was recorded by a woman feminist songwriter and performer named Meg Christian in the 60s. Anybody know the name Meg Christian? Elliot. Okay, excellent. So there are times when I give myself the permission to read lyrics that everything's about divinity. Everything's about yearning. When I say I'm in love with you, I'm not necessarily talking to you. I'm talking to God, right? Or talking to you and God. And so here's the words from Meg Christian. I was walking along in little pieces, and I never even knew that the road back home. Wait a second. I never even know. Like, I was walking around in little pieces, and I never even knew that the road back home to me was was the road I took to you, that the road back home to me was the road I took to you. You see what I mean? If you sing the song about God, and this is also about our lives, is it not? I was walking around in little pieces, and I never even knew that the road back home to me was the road I took to you, that the road back home to me was the road I took to you. Thank you, everyone, for another beautiful night. Thank you so much, Haf, for sharing your life and your journey with us. May it continue through November, December, giving you much joy and gratitude. And if anyone would like to share your journey next week, you would let me know. And if you'd like to create a slideshow like I did and like Hoff did, please feel free to do so. And you don't have to get to as many stops along the journey. Just recalling the way that I did it was a little bit closer to the way it is in the Parshat Maseh. In the language that I used, I encamped at. So remember in the Parsha it says the Israelites encamped at, and this and such happened there. And then what I added was I encamped at, and I named a place or an event. And then I said what I learned there or who I met there and what I got from that person. So it could go in any way, but I used a little closer to the language. And then I set off for is what the Parsha says. And I followed that as well. But you don't have to, there's no rules around this. What's more important is to do the exercise and then look back on it and look for habitual behavior. Look for mistakes, look for challenges, look for triumphs, look for people, look for the ulai moments, if not for moments.
Can we look for the silver lining?
Absolutely, Judy. And you can sing the entire thing too. All righty. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to